organizations. Yeah, I'm going to say a bit about the variants of utopias. We have, of course, we have the two basic types, utopias and dystopias, which is still a very important distinction to now. Actually, in current times, we see a lot of dystopian advances, dystopian ideas, especially in movies. Like Matrix, for instance, is a dystopian idea as well. 1984 is a dystopian idea. And they're both equally important, as they both sort of criticize and point to certain patterns of organization and technological advances. But they differ, of course, in what they want to say. Utopia is always the maximally desirable society, and dystopia is always the maximally undesirable society. So that is one basic distinction. Another distinction which is very important in utopian theory is that between utopias and ideology. There's always been a debate on whether there actually is a difference between those two and what the difference could be, if ideology is always also utopian or utopias are always some sort of ideology. But generally the distinction which is sort of accepted by now is that the utopian idea is always the inconceivable, whereas the ideology is something which is conceivable. Ideology proposes a state of society which can actually be reached by current steps and concrete paths which we can consider now, whereas the utopian society, utopian ideas were so far out, or considered so far out and unfeasible, that they're actually not reachable. And that's also within the word of utopia, because it says utopia is a place and you says none, so utopia is sort of the place without a place. That's the general idea they have. It's an idea which doesn't have a place, and the classical utopias which came up in the 19th century are all in the formal design, they're all placed on islands, remote islands, and that's always an example on why how removed they are actually from the current place and society we're in. So that's the idea. There's no path to realize it, actually. It's just a fundamental critique of the existing state, and they're also often critical towards ideologies. Some utopian thinkers have always been saying that ideologies actually only serve to cover up some current social problems, like socialist ideologies, for instance, used to cover up a lot of existing problems in socialist societies and socialist dictatorships, by always mentioning the good state, which is then to appear in some years, or the good human society, which we'll have in a couple of years and stuff like that. So utopian thinkers used to criticize that a lot and actually then reflected on ideology. Ideology, on the other hand, is always like some sort of a feasible extrapolation of existing states. It says, we have this state now, and we can do concrete things, we can develop this particular technology, or we can change this particular societal pattern, and then we are in the utopian society, right? So that's a very much more concrete way. They could say, like, we have this concrete path to follow. So it's only a partial critique of the existing state. It says only particular things have to be changed. And ideologies are also always striving for an actual change, and they always follow a political agenda. Sometimes, of course, they serve as a justification for some sort of bargains, as in socialist ideology, but sometimes they also follow their own genuine utopian agenda. So another basic distinction which you can make between utopias are whether they're more technology-oriented or more socially oriented. Like when you have this technology orientation, then technology is like the big thing, and then the social order will somewhat follow up. You know, then of course both are very intimately connected, and you can't think the one without the other, but you can put a different perspective to things. So with technology orientation, then there's always some sort of utopian technology at the core. And a lot of these utopian ideas which developed during industrialization were heavily technology oriented. They said we have this and that technology, and then the society will automatically be good and in a perfect state and a utopian society if we have this technology. So society is considered as either stable and not altered, or just slightly altered in those utopian ideas, or it's just completely out of focus. Of course, these technology-oriented utopian ideas are often technology deterministic as well. And that's a thing while a lot of engineers have actually been proposing these technology-oriented utopian ideas. And that is precisely the attitude I mentioned, that that you think you devise up some sort of technology, and then once you got the technology, society will automatically change by using this, or by having to use this technology into the good society. Of course, that's a very wacky idea somehow, and very short-sighted in most cases, because society also has a lot of uses for technology and constantly alters technology. So you can never actually expect society to be changed just by the introduction of some sort of particular technology. This is also a sort of utopian idea which we find now very frequently. We have these in many shapes, like light builder is one thing we have in German science a lot. They give out some sort of general idea what a technological branch should develop into, or they have some technological visions, which are of course very important also for stocks and ideas like that. And many say actually that the current transhumanist agenda is more or less some sort of marketing gag to propose some sort of utopian ideas to sell all the nano stuff they're developing, or sell all the biotechnology they're developing. So that's one thing where we find these technology-oriented and heavily technology-deterministic utopian ideas. Another thing is the technological promise, which I already mentioned from industrialization, and where they were actually saying if we perfectionize the process of production technology and production industry, then automatically the humankind will develop into something better, and they don't have to work anymore, there will be no need. And actually there's very interesting, I haven't been investigating in this very systematically, but there's an interesting sort of disillusion going on with this technological promise from the era of industrialization, because we are actually in that state now. We have this state in a number of theories. Post-materialism, for instance, one theory which proposes that we're actually in this particular state where production industry has the potential to provide us with everything we need, with all the basic stuff we need. So we have actually reached that state, but the good human society, the good human person, or the perfect utopian society where nobody needs to work anymore and everybody's free to do and follow whatever he or she wants to, did not develop from it. You know, quite the contrary, actually. We are very, very concerned with the jobs we are losing due to this industrialization process, which is actually more or less running as planned, but everybody's unhappy with it. So that's sort of a strange outcome of the technological promise, which started about 150 years ago. And another idea, of course, is science fiction. Science fiction is also heavily technology-oriented and proposes a lot of ideas from within technology, how society can actually develop, in which shapes and stuff like that. The other orientation, of course, is quite the contrary, or the exact opposite, the social orientation. And within this particular perspective, you take the social order to be the primary factor. You have to reorganize society, and then probably you need some sort of technology to reorganize it in that way, but technology is actually just a minor factor. So here in this orientation, the utopian social order is actually at the core, and technology has the role which the social order had previously, that it's either stable or just slightly altered or out of focus somehow. And technology, the interesting point about this sort of orientation within utopian thinking is that technology here is not meant to be deterministic or determining the patterns of social development, but rather to be highly malleable. It's like the technology can always be altered in the way we need it and be changed in the way we need it. And this is also a very classic position. You will find it with Marx, for instance, in the famous chapter 13 of the Capital, where he has been concerned with technology. It's a famous chapter for philosophers of technology anyway, where he's been saying that if we need the socialist society, and if the socialist society should develop naturally, then we need to alter technology in this and that way, and we need these big centralized industries and production industries in this and that way. And so that was actually sort of a paradigm case of this utopian social order idea. Okay, and then one last distinction is between global and the local utopian ideas, which is particularly important in our times. Back in the old days, with the first utopian thoughts